Okay, so stealing gratitude, everyone, is actually a larger series of work that I do with students and do with people that I have gone on retreats with. So what my plan is if I'm doing it with my students and I see them for about an hour a day for 5 days, it usually takes me the entire week to get through to get to the part so that they understand the stealing gratitude. When I'm doing it in a retreat setting, it's usually on the first day, but it takes probably 2 to 3 hours. So I'm trying to create this in a very short time in a 45-minute session. So I'm going to start with something that is really important to adventure-based counseling and what I do as a practitioner. So
And you
one of the
can
things
take more than 45 minutes if you like,
oh, thank you.
as much
So
time as you like.
okay, thank you. So what I'm going to be talking a little bit about is how I started with this idea and how I start working with it with my students. And there's a practitioner called Carl Roanoke who started this whole idea of comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone. And it's modeled after a psychologist who did this Yerkes Dawson law. And it's about this empirical relationship between arousal and performance. This has been done since 1908 was when this started actually. And so it's kind of been going on for a long time. Sometimes people like will say it's a lot like different kinds of psychological things like zone of proximal development, which is used within child psychology. There is some similarities to it, but then this is a lot more about how people socially interact and how people gain an understanding working within groups of how to understand that people have different zones of zones that they're comfortable with. So the comfort zone is something you're really comfortable with. It could be something like just something that you just get joy out. It's easy. You could do it every day. It could be something as easy as tying your shoe. You're comfortable doing it. You can do it all day long. No big deal. That stretch zone is something that's a little bit more difficult. The stretch zone often is something that you're getting your greatest learning from, but it is something that you can do with a little bit of help. So something like if I'm using in the school setting, I might say, having an older student working with a younger student, teaching them about how to like phonetics, how to sound out words and things like that. So it might be hard for them to understand how to teach it, but once they have some practice, they can then teach it to younger students. The panic zone is an area where that you have panic and it's very hard to get any joy. And that's why I'm going to talk about this idea with gratitude is that panic zone. So panic zone is where all you can think about is that place of stress. So for instance, I really don't like large bodies of water. So being on a cruise would put me in a panic zone. So that is that idea. So what I do when I start this with my students, and we usually then have a conversation about it. So I hope that you're willing to have a conversation with it too. Doing it on the internet is a little bit different. Doing it on Zoom is a little bit different than what I would do in person. In person, we actually do two lessons together. One where we physically move together, and then another one where we're also physically moving, but we stand in different areas of where our comfort zone is, our stretch zone, and our panic zone is. Here, what we do is I think of a traffic light. So that's why I asked everyone to bring a green object, a yellow object, and a red object. So here's, I have a green tractor here, a yellow car, and a red pen. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, and what I ask my students to do when I've had to do this online or I've worked with other people, is I ask you just to hold up your object. We're going to save conversation for after we do this little part. We're going to take about 5 minutes or so. I'm going to ask different questions. I'm also going to participate so you know where I kind of land in these areas. So for instance, okay, the question first thing is how comfortable are you making dinner for your family? How about exercising in a large group? How about reading in front of a group of people? Reading out loud in front of a group of people. How about telling a personal story that is difficult for you? A personal story that might be a little bit difficult to tell. How about going up to a group of strangers and starting a conversation? How about driving a stick shift? How about traveling to a country where you don't know the language? How about leading a presentation? How about having to recite something that you wrote? How about singing in front of people? How about going to a new temple or a new place where you don't know anyone else there? How about telling your children when they've done something that have disappointed you, or telling someone that you love dearly that they've disappointed you in some way? How about disappointing someone that you love? How about traveling by yourself? And does anyone have any that they can think of off the top of their head that they'd like to ask? More than happy to hear other people's ideas.
Speaking a foreign language.
Rukmini Prabhu.
Jumping, skydiving, or jumping off into the air.
How about
or even jumping into freezing cold water. Like
how about just climbing, like climbing mountains, like going up high in mountains? How do you feel about that? Oh, how about backpack? Backpack.
Fear of needles.
Oh, needles? Needles?
The injection or blood draw.
Anyone else? How about trying new food that you've never tried before? Okay, so while doing this with students, we spend a lot of time going through different things, and oftentimes it ends up being about things that are academic. When I'm working with corporations or groups in a retreat, I try to tailor it towards the questions more towards what they might be working on within the retreat. So when I'm working with students at school, we talk about it in an education setting. So what did you notice is always the question. What did you notice about our group when we were doing this? Rukmini?
that everyone is so different.
That everyone is so different. Krishna and Drew, did you have something? What else did you notice?
Same as Rukmini Prabhu said, like everyone is so different, and you know.
I noticed for myself that it was, I was having sometimes a hard time distinguishing between comfort and stretch, because I I like challenge. So sometimes I was just finding myself saying, well, do I really enjoy that? Or is it a stretch for me?
Really nice. So noticing that sometimes you can be in between those zones. So is it sometimes you're in between that comfort and stretch, or sometimes are you in between that stretch and panic? What else do we notice?
For me, one of the things that I noticed is that a little bit of a discomfort in divulging the ones that were red or panic, like almost like a little bit of an embarrassment.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Andrea, because like that is something that we'll talk about more as we get further into this discussion. So yeah, that's a great point. Is it okay to admit it to ourselves, but then we're admitting that also to a group of people, and how does that make us feel? Amazing. Perfect. Love it. What else?
For me, it brought up questions too. Like I think when a question was asked, I was looking for who else had colors like me. So who else was green like me, and then who else was scared of things like me. Just kind of assessing like who is most like me in the group and who is maybe most different. I found myself doing that.
That's a really interesting point, Ashley. Like, are there things that there's commonality between all of us? Like we look at each other and you could think, oh, there's so much commonality, but then there's also so many differences. And then do I relate better to people who have the same commonalities as I do? Or do maybe I relate better to people who are a lot different than I am? So those are also questions that can be brought up. Rukmini Prabhu, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, just that things seem to be in groups. Like in other words, just my discomforts seem to be sort of grouped together, and some, at least that's a perception that I had.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that can totally happen. Like some of the questions I asked for about really physical things, and some of those things might be more difficult for you. And then there's some of those things where it's performance based, and that might be really difficult for someone else. So there are some groups with that. Sada.
Yeah. And I think there's some questions which I've actually never done those things, like flying or jumping off a plane. And then you sort of have to extrapolate what you might feel. So there's a lot of, I think, fears that are hidden, but we kind of have them and we might not really know why.
Yeah, it brings up, I love that because it brings up these ideas that you might not have really thought about. Like, well, am I afraid of it? Am I afraid of even thinking about it? Or when I got to that point, would I be afraid of trying it? So this is a lot about when we talk about these things. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to add before I moved on?
Can I say one thing that it brought up for me? I don't know if this is off the topic, but you just reminded me, my father was a navigator during World War II. And he was really actually quite bad at navigating. When we would be driving in the car, he would always get us lost. And he said that one thing he would do before dropping these paratroopers over, German territory or something, they would say, okay, where are we on the map? And he said, in my father's vernacular, I didn't know where the hell we were. But he would say on the map, he would point like to a place that he would make up and he'd say, we're right here. And then they would have the courage to jump out of the plane as a paratrooper because of his feigned knowledge of where they were. So you just reminded me of that.
It's really interesting. And it's also actually interesting that you said that, because sometimes I actually ask students that about how could you find directions without like GPS? Like if you didn't have a GPS, where does that put you in a comfort stretch or panic zone? And most of my students, or most people, are very panicked by that idea. So it's interesting that sometimes like that whole like fake it to make other people feel comfortable is something that we do a lot throughout our lives. And you actually made me think of something that I do in school. Is one of the things I have to do is orienteering with my students. So I have to teach them map skills and how to read a compass and stuff. I have no idea what I'm doing. But like, for some reason, I can kind of like, I have a partner who does it with me and he's really good at it. And I kind of just like piggyback on what he says. And for some reason, it makes kids really comfortable that I know what I'm doing. But inside, I'm super panicked about it because I don't want to get anyone like teach them the wrong way or get them lost or anything like that. But because so why I do this and why I do this is it's really important for kids to, I think, even if you're in the same social groups, to learn how different we all are. No one is always in a panic zone, no one is always in a comfort zone, and no one is always in that stretch zone. So, when we're working with people, and when I talk to students about this, and when I talk to like corporations about this, is you don't understand necessarily something that might come really easy to you isn't going to come easy to someone else. And by diminishing how stressful it is from them, actually you're stealing their joy in that way. And then the other way is that if you're comparing yourselves to someone else and like, oh, so and so is so much better at, singing kirtan than I am, like you're then taking away the joy of the actual kirtan or being in the act or listening or participating. So this is like the beginning stages of where I start talking about that with the idea of joy and the idea of gratitude, which then so this would be a 1-day activity, and then I would move into the next day. So I hope, does that make sense of where I started with everything? Okay, awesome. And if you have questions, please stop me because I'm
So you're talking about stealing their joy or stealing your own joy of being able to be present for that activity.
Yes.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you. So within that, then after we do this and we talk about it, I mean, they probably are like, okay, and they always call me Sarah, by the way. They never call me by my last name. There's like, all right, Sarah, we got it. I'm stealing someone else's gratitude. I'm not like everyone else. I have to appreciate myself. Like they're always like, we understand, but I make them talk about it until I feel like everyone could lead it themselves. So to me, that's really important. Not only is it, do you understand it, but could you teach it? Because I don't feel like, and a lot of my students, I'm having them work with younger students. If you don't understand it well enough to teach it, then I haven't taught it well enough. So, so that's how we spend some time with that. And then we get actually into the idea of gratitude. So that would be the next part of what we would work on. So by doing that, I find it really important to work with students in this way. And I'm just going to explain how I do this. We're not going to go about doing it in this way. But what I do is I create different groupings. So sometimes I'll do concentric circles and then have an outer circle and different people are facing each other. And then I have them move around and I ask them questions. And what we do with that is we spend, I'll ask them a question like, what is the gift that you've gotten in life that you feel like is most meaningful to you? And who gave it to you and why is it meaningful? The person in the inside of the circle will listen and they are not allowed to talk for 30 seconds. And then the other person will discuss it and talk about that object. I make them kind of start talking about more personal things in these like small group pairings, but they're not with their friends. So that's a really important thing to me. So I create it in different ways. I'll ask them to look for their soulmate. And when their soulmate is someone who has the same sole bottom of their shoe that looks the same. So they have to look around to see if they can find matching soles. Or I'll do something where they have to line themselves up with their birthdays. They cannot talk, but they have to figure out whose birthday is first. So starting in January through December, and they have to figure it out. And then I have them, come together, or like we'll do something with names in different ways. So this is before, this is like the first few days of school. Again, when I'm in a retreat and I'm doing it with their retreat, it's within the first few hours of being together. So creating these groups, because it's really easy for me to go talk to, my best friend over here and tell them everything they already know about me, because like I spend all my time with them anyways, and it's not taking me out of that comfort zone. It's I need to put myself in that stretch zone. So this is putting them in this stretch zone. That stretch zone is actually the place where you're going to get the most learning, have the most learning. And it's also a place that you can have more gratitude, because sometimes, which I also talk about with them, sometimes when you're in those moments that it's so comfortable, it's hard to be grateful for things that are so comfortable to you. So, so that's what I do. So we spend that time and do that. So we usually go through about 6 to 7 questions. And then they end up with a completely random partner. Someone I'm random in their brain, not always random in my brain. I kind of make sure, like, I'll stop when I'm like, oh wait, these two are best friends. I can't put them together. So I have to make sure. If I have other staff members, if I'm doing it in an education setting, if I have other staff members, I make sure that staff members aren't with staff members and they're with kids. So that because I want kids to know when we're doing these kind of things that we're on an even playing field. So I'm really big on always in my classroom, like, please call me by my first name. I'm calling you by your first name. So you have the opportunity to call me that. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you don't have to. But like, I don't want to be the sage on stage all knowing. It's a learning opportunity for me as much as it's a learning opportunity for them. So I try to create a space for them where they feel like that I'm on the same playing field. And I have a gratitude partner also. And so when I do my gratitude partners with anyone, depending on, the situation for my classroom, it's something like I want them to do a class goal, but it cannot be grade driven. It cannot be like, I want to get all A's this trimester, or I want to get 100% in this class. It cannot be that. That is not allowed, in my opinion. Grades don't matter. You're all going to get A's anyway. As long as you do what you're supposed to do, you're good. Like, it's not an important part of class. So the class one has to be driven to an actual goal, a SMART goal that we go through. So is it measurable? Can we understand it? So as a group, we kind of talk it through. And what we do is, can you check me on it? Do you understand it? Do you think this is a good goal for me? So they work with their gratitude partner or goal partner, and then they do gratitude also, their goal partner on working on their goals, and then they bring it to the group. So for instance, believe it or not, I'm not the most organized person in the world. I think I pretend to be organized. I put this idea on that I'm not, but I'm kind of like a slob. Like, it's like I'm organized for other people, but for myself, it's really difficult for me to stay organized. So for me, I also get pulled into stuff really easily. So like for my classroom goal, it might have been something like, I'm organized and I'm meeting, I'm doing all the things that I need to do by the dates that I'm saying they need to be done. Okay. Can you check me on it? So like, kids know what dates. So like, midterms are this day. Did I get everything done that I was supposed to get done by midterm? Is everything getting done when I say it's going to? Can they check me on it? Is it measurable? Yes, they're getting their grades, that kind of stuff. And then some sort of personal goal that is fun. So it has to be some sort of goal that is like learning how to do a handstand, or maybe reading a book a week, whatever they want that is actually personal to them. And again, I want them to see there's differences, and I want them with their goal partner and their gratitude partner. I want them to see that their goals are valid, their personal goal and their classroom goal, or again, if we're in a retreat setting, those goals are valid, but everyone's are going to be different. After they do it, they work with their partner, they work with the class. Then we write it on a big giant piece of paper and we sign it. And then again, I'm really big into like stoplight things. We do check-ins. So the kids have to talk about their goals, have to talk about what they're doing. And then again, it's at red, yellow, and green. Green, they totally worked on the goal. They need a new goal. Yellow, they're working on it, but they could still use some work. Red, they haven't been working on it at all. They need some help. So again, bringing everybody in there and having them be a part of that. So the goals for them, and their gratitude partners are to help them be accountable, but also if they have that moment where they're, again, taking stealing that gratitude from themselves, where they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing for themselves, they're getting checked on it and they're getting support. Again, like I think that's a huge part within the educational setting, within corporate settings, within any setting that we're doing any kind of retreats or doing any kind of learning, is that they know that they have a support so that they are getting that gratitude. Does that make sense? Okay. Does anyone have questions about that before I move on to the next part?
Can you just explain about stealing their joy again?
Yeah, so for kids, if they aren't we talk a lot about if you set a goal for yourself, it needs to be a goal that's about you, not a goal that I think that you should do, not a goal that someone else thinks you should do, but like a goal that is actually like intrinsic. I work with clients with this too. So like when people are setting, it's great right now, actually talking about this on January 1st, talking about setting resolutions. It's a lot like that. So are you setting a resolution because you think other people want that to be your goal or your resolution? If you're setting it for someone else, that is sucking the joy out of doing any kind of goal. My son just walked into my house and he's really loud. I'm sorry. Jacob, I'm in a meeting. So sorry, everyone. So then, sorry, he was like gonna come into the screen. I apologize, and he just made me a little flustered. So then, if they're doing it for someone else, it's stealing joy because it's actually nothing that they really want to do. So there's no joy in that actual goal. If they're not doing it and it's something that they really want to accomplish, what is the reason behind that? And how can that other person or the community help them reach those kind of goals? What is stopping them from doing those kind of things? Does that make more sense? Andrea?
Follow-up question. I don't know if this is relevant to where you're going with this presentation, but if we're doing the goal for Krishna, is that the same equivalency as doing it for someone else, or does that go into a different area with what you're just describing?
I really love that question. I think when you're doing a goal for Krishna, in my opinion, and anyone can, react in this way. I honestly feel like that's a goal to better yourself. So for me, I feel like that is still about you building a relationship with Krishna and yourself. So I don't think it's for someone else. I think it's someone else if you're talking about, and I'm going to use weight loss because I feel like that's always people's resolutions this time of year is like, I'm going to eat better, I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to get all A's, I'm going to do this. It's not about them at all. It's about these outward things that are driving them rather than what's internal and what's really going to be fulfilling to them. I felt like there was another question. Was there another question? Okay. All right. So this actually is about this actually takes about 2 days to get to that point. It takes a little bit of time. It's a lot about building community. If again, I'm in the workshop, this is usually lunchtime. So like all morning we've spent doing these kind of things, getting them ready. They're spending time with their goal setting and gratitude partners. They're doing time with us. They're really taking time to get to know who they are and who their partner is and how they can serve them, which I think is an important piece. After we do this, we do something called
Sarah, before you go on, could you just explain gratitude partners just a little bit more?
Yeah.
You're speaking really fast.
I'm sorry.
No, I hope you'll take whatever time you need because we have plenty of time.
Okay.
But could you just like unpack gratitude partners?
Yeah.
Like how can I be a gratitude partner? And what does it mean? A little bit more about what it means.
Yeah. So
how can I be a gratitude partner for my son, for my 2-year-old, for my grandchildren, for my husband, for somebody who's angry at me or Yeah.
So I actually believe in having a gratitude partner that is someone else. So I have a gratitude partner every day. I send her gratitude and I talk about this with students. I talk about it again when I'm doing corporate work and retreats. And it is, again, something that you are truly grateful for, to take that moment in time during that day, even if you've had a really rough day. And I know in the corporate setting, it happens a lot where it's really hard to think about gratitude or being grateful for, and like your job or where you're working, or like you feel put upon. And I talk a lot about this with my students, this idea of like, I just have another thing to do. I have another thing to do. I have more work to do. I have more of this. And actually taking that time with this gratitude partner. So your goal setting partner, when I do this in a in a retreat setting and in this, your goal setting partner and your gratitude partner is the same person. So for my students, I often give them gratitude prompts because they're not used to doing gratitude. So it could be something as easy as when you woke up this morning, who are you grateful for that did something that was unexpected? And it gives them that kind of pause to reflect on even a simple thing like, you know, my mom woke me up and instead of screaming for me to get out of bed really fast, she like gently woke me up instead. And I really appreciated that. So having them think about those things that are maybe what someone might think is mundane or not a big deal or nothing, getting to them to start thinking about those things every day. What I have found is that they are able to be more grateful for little things daily, but also they're more willing to serve because they take themselves out of taking and start also giving, because when they have a partner, they know that they have to also give to that partner as well. So that's how I structure it in this setting. But gratitude partners, like I oftentimes daily am just I remind like Dial, my fiance, I remind him daily of something that like always out of the ordinary and out of the blue, because it's so important to me to function in a relationship, to remember that it's not just always all about business. And I think that happens a lot of times in relationships. It's like, okay, I need to do this and I need to do this and I need to do this. And you're not taking that time to be grateful for your partner. So every day I just out of the blue will message him like, you know, I was really thinking about how you fixed my light fixture. And I am so happy every time I walk into the bathroom and I can actually see now because I couldn't before. And it's been like a really positive thing within relationships. And when I do couples work, this is a lot of stuff that I will do just to get them started to learn how to do like a more nonviolent communication. And that's how I start it with students, because I figure if I start it with them when they're younger, they're going to be more inclined to do it throughout the years. Does that make sense?
Yes, I don't want to be asking so many
Oh, you
questions,
can
but
ask away.
I hope other people will also ask. I know you're all being very thoughtful, and I'm being such a talkie box, but do you have a different gratitude partner every day? Do you have one for life? Do you have one for a week? Do you have one for 2 days?
So I've had the same gratitude partner for the last 4 years. Actually.
And that's not your fiance. It's
No.
someone
So no, it's my friend Kelly Jean. I actually teach with her, and we were on a bus going to a retreat, and I actually said to her, I'm like, oh, I had a gratitude partner for the last 2 years, but she isn't texting me back. And she's like, well, what's a gratitude partner? So I explained to her, and she's like, oh, that's really cool. I'm like, would you like to be my gratitude partner? And so, yeah, for the last 4 years, that's what we do. And she always reminds me, like, and that's her gratitude towards me. It's just like, I'm so grateful that you always remember to do the gratitude, because I do not, like, she doesn't always remember to do it, or she'll forget for a few days, or she won't respond. So I just picked someone who wanted to work on being more grateful in their life. And it helped me be more grateful. I think it's just something that I've learned throughout the years, that I have to find something every day to be grateful for. So I found someone else to do it with me.
Could it be someone in your family, or it's
Oh,
better if it's not?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. It could be anybody. I mean, and it could be like, I could say to Dial, like, hey, let's do gratitude every day for the next year and see what happens. Like, and have a gratitude jar. That's another thing that I've done with people, is I've created the gratitude jar. And at the end of the year, we then pull out all the things that we were grateful for every day. It's a really, really beautiful thing. It's something that I teach when I work with couples. And they have found I honestly have found a lot of success in that. I've done it with my children as well. So it's a really nice thing. I've done it with my students where, you know, like at the end of the trimester, I write like things about gratitude. So it's a very interesting thing to have it in the educational setting. It's not used so often in the educational setting, but at the end of my classes, I always do a survey, and I ask them, well, what was one thing that if I was going to keep in my class that's like a non-negotiable, what would it be? And I would say 80% of it is to keep the gratitude. Other things are like, you know, they like that they can call me by my first name, which I think is hilarious, but I'm like, it's just a name. So Andrea, did you have a question? No, you were just excited. Okay. Any other questions about the gratitude part of where I am when I'm doing this with students or in other settings? Krishna Drew.
I just want to mention, like when you mentioned about the light, like, my husband, he changed all the bulbs in this house, and I'm like, wow, I can see now. So I just wanted to like put it
No,
out. I could so relate.
No, it's such an amazing thing. Being grateful, I think like that's a hard thing for a lot of people to like, when someone truly is willing to take care of you, sometimes it's like, I'm a person that's a hard thing to accept. And knowing that someone is willing to do that for me has been something that I've had to work on being more grateful for, because it's something that I'm like, I can do it myself. Like I was talking beforehand, how like, I can't take an actual shower because of my foot, like washing my hair. Like I'm not asking for help. I'm going to figure it out myself. So yes, Krishna Drew, I can totally relate to that. So after this part of we get through the gratitude, we got through the goal setting. The next thing that I do with my students or on a retreat, I always do it on every retreat that I've ever been a part of. I probably have done 15 retreats in the last probably 7 years or so. They're, with schools or corporations. And I do something called affirmation bags. So I have the people, I have these envelopes because I want to hang them on the wall. They have to put their name on it, and then they just design it however they want. So they have creative freedom of however they're going to design these affirmation bags. And I keep them up for the entire trimester if I'm in school, or for the entire time we're at the retreat. They're kept up. The envelope part is open, so you can stick a note in people's affirmation envelopes. So we go over what that is. We take some time to like let them dry, make it beautiful. It's really hilarious. Kids are really funny about that. They really get into all my markers. Adults actually too. They get super into the markers. And then you'll have like the ones who are like, I can't draw it out. I'm like, I don't care if you can draw, your name needs to be on it. That's what's important. I'm like, you can put something that's important to you on it. It doesn't have to be an image. It can be words, whatever you want. And we put them up, and then throughout the time, people will stick in different affirmations. So I always have like 4x5 cards, so people can like stick those in and put a little like note in somebody's envelope. And a big thing for me is I actually ask people not to look at them, not to look at them until after the retreat or after the trimester. When working with kids, if you know you have a kid that's going to be a little sassy, for lack of a better word, sometimes you check. But with adults, I usually don't have to worry about that. And then you keep them. And I have like 5 of them. I'm not upstairs in my room right now, but in my bedroom next to my nightstand. In my nightstand, I have like my affirmation envelopes, and sometimes I'll just read these really nice things that I don't think are a big deal that I've done, that other people can see that were like really like, I don't know, they thought it was really awesome. I'm like, that's just what I do. Like, I didn't really think of it in any other way. And it makes you like feel more connected to people in a way that you maybe didn't before. And it also makes you look for good in people that at first it might seem like it's forcing you to look for good, but you're really able to see it. I do something called communication training with this. This is part of what I do on retreats, and it's pretty intense, and it's in your small groups. There's like less than 10 people in your small groups. There's sometimes really personal, intense things that come out of it. And having someone know that they really heard you, and you read that later where you feel really alone, is a really powerful thing. So that would be the next step, the next day of working with students, or the next like hour or so, is doing this affirmation envelopes, explaining it, and what it looks like for the group, and really being like, it's really nice to look at that after, because it reminds you of like what an amazing feeling you had during that time, this connection, and it keeps you connected to your group. Does anyone have questions about that?
Sarah, I have a question. I'm loving all of these ideas. Did you come up with these yourself, or is this like something that, like, how did you come across this process?
So yeah, sorta. Like, I've kind of created it. I've taken bits and pieces from other people's things. So I did something called adventure-based counseling and adventure-based training. So because what I do is I do like high and low ropes courses, and I do like team building activities and things like that. It's the majority of the part of my job. There are different kinds of pieces that I took from them, and then I created them to make them my own, because I wanted them to be authentic. And I think that's a really important piece to this, especially when you're working with kids. If it's not authentic, they know. If they know that you're just like reading it off of somewhere, or you got it from somewhere else and you're not making your own, they will know, and they won't do it. They will call you out on it, and they will let you know that they're not doing it. So yes, these are maybe pieces like that hold the stretch zone that actually came from the adventure-based counseling that I did, and also because I have a master's in counseling, so learning about those things, but then taking little pieces have come from other places and then made it my own. No problem. And you can totally use them. Anyone else?
I was more thinking, yeah, I was more thinking that I might, if I ever do a retreat, that I would hire you to come lead all of these, because these are such wonderful ideas to have for really any type of retreat. So yeah.
Yeah, well, this is, I mean, that's a huge part of what I do. And actually, like, my business is more going towards like, how can I help facilitate people in this way? Because I don't feel like most people have like the game aspect going on, like it's like, and I'm very playful, so I create the playful part of it in retreat. So Ashley, I would love to work with you.
Ashley, it's really funny because I was thinking, Ashley keeps saying we need to have a Vaishnavi retreat. And when are we going to do that? And I keep saying, well, after COVID, we'll do something, So Sarah, this would be so amazing. You must, we'll do a retreat. We'll have a Vaishnavi retreat. And this would be really beautiful. I think
I would
it would
love
be
to do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We have to figure out where and when, but I think this would be so inspiring for everyone.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to do that.
I would love to see how you would tailor this with Krishna consciousness, like with Radha Krishna in the heart, and kind of how you would, because you said that you tailor the questions depending on like who is participating. So I would be really interested to see how you would put it in like Krishna conscious flavor.
Yeah, I'm really grateful. And I might always say, I feel like I say that all the time. People are like, okay, we got it, you're grateful. But I'm really grateful that I do have this education background, because I think that when you're creating a retreat or creating this kind of thing, understanding how to like have a curriculum to do this is really important. And so yeah, that I'm actually really excited to do that as well, because I think that would make it so much more inspiring. So yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for that. So, and then the last thing we go to is the whole idea of stealing joy. Okay. And stealing joy and how you can't be grateful. With this it's a pretty heavy part of what I do. Again, I would tailor this different for every group that I work with, but I really want to talk about how I did this in a retreat, the communication retreats that I do with the high school students. I really want them to think about social injustice. I want them to think about privilege. And I want them to be able to understand where they fit in the world and how their perception can steal joy from other people because they assume that everyone is the same as them. And when you live in an area, like in the area that I teach in, and it's pretty homogenous, it ends up being a really powerful piece of what we do. So what I do is I have them, I'm very big into circles, by the way. I want to just tell you, we do a lot of circle stuff. Like every time I have class, every time I have groups, we circle up. I say no one can hide in a circle. Everyone is in the same space. So no one can be in front of anyone and no one can be behind anyone. And I always start with this way. And then I ask some very difficult questions. I let the kids know how serious it's going to be. I let them know, and I actually have done this with a few companies as well. I let them know that it might be triggering, and then I'm available to talk to afterwards if they feel triggered at all in any kind of way. That it's important to be able to speak their truth and to be able to be really honest with the group. And that's how the group can grow, and honest with themselves. So we ask questions like, have you ever been judged because of the color of your skin? Have you ever been left out of a group? Excuse my language, but I'm using, again, this is for high school. Have you ever been name called and called slut or any of those kind of things? Sorry, I'm using those words, but it's for the point of this group. And they walk in and out of the circle. So what happens is if they've been called those things, they go into the circle, they go further in, and then all these other people are standing on the outside, and then people pull them back to where they are. And then at the end, when we do all this, and I mean, it's intense.
Wait, can you explain, pull them back? I didn't get that.
Okay, so we all stand in one giant circle. And then if you were ever name called, or you have a disability, or you might, like, I'll ask different questions, like kind of like I did when we were holding up things, but they're way more personal and race related in ways. They step into the circle to show the group who has been persecuted in some sort of way. And then what we have them do is we after I ask them to pull them back to be with the group. So I ask one question, whoever steps in the circle, everyone can see, we kind of take a moment of silence, and then we pull them back to be part of the group. It is kind of like a culminating thing that happens, like, we see those differences, but sometimes we don't think about how much we can enjoy something, but someone else can't. We enjoy these freedoms, we enjoy, our privilege, but then other people that we're around, we're not focused or understanding where they're coming from. And it steals that gratitude. If you're in that fear, if you're afraid that you're going to get in trouble because of the color of your skin, or if you're afraid that you're going to be picked on because you don't agree with the group, how is that going to take away from you? And we talk a lot about this, and this is a very long part of what I do. It's about, the activity is about 20 to 25 minutes, but then the conversation can last, depending on the group and the time, can last up to 2 hours. And we talk about how freedom is a very difficult thing, and what freedom means to me is going to be very different than what it means to you, and how it's like a super heavy thing. I'm sorry, I just got like heavy. And how it steals people's joy. And it also steals your joy when you really are conscious of these things, and how do we bring that joy back into other people's lives? So we find out, and we're very conscious of what other people are going through. Essentially, I don't want to say walk a mile in someone else's shoes, but at least see their story. And then how can we bring joy back into their life, and how can we be grateful for what we have? Because a lot of times then what I've noticed, and this is how I talked about like the whole idea of gratitude, kids will feel really guilty that they never noticed or never knew that someone else was having any issues because they were so focused on themselves. And you know, how people will talk about how grateful and how powerful it is to be brought back into the group. And that is kind of where it ends. I can go on and talk more about that, but it's one of those things that it's really hard to explain unless you're going like in it, like you're part of it. I do think that it's really hard when you live in a state of fear. And I think we live in fear in different ways to be grateful for things. And I love to use this really simple example, and it doesn't really have to do much of what of the last lesson, but when I explain it to kids, then they really get it. It could be like, for me, going that whole idea of going on a cruise, right? Everyone's like, oh my God, it's so amazing. You're going on this amazing cruise. You're doing all these things, but I'm stuck in this fear. I can't be grateful for being on that cruise because I am terrified that I'm going to somehow go overboard and drown. That's my fear. So it could be something for just kids to understand or people to understand, something as simple as that, but there's so many layers to that. And it can go from there. So understanding people's fear is just as important as understanding who they are, so that you can work with them, so that you can be grateful for their presence and they can be grateful for you. And then it can be a community that they can lean on each other. And that is essentially my presentation for today. Does anyone have questions? I know that last part was like, what?
I love that, Sarah. Yeah, I think one question I have is, I'm just thinking of some relationships that I have with family members and just thinking about, how it can be hard when you've known someone who's in your family for so long, to really know what their fears are, especially if there's, if it's like a parent-child dynamic or parent-grandparent dynamic. Do you ever, is there any way that you could see that people could work one-on-one with these practices with a family member?
Yeah, for sure. So I think understanding the tools and kind of talking through it, like I used to, when I would counsel, I counseled kids as young as 3 years old. So and his mom told me that he wouldn't sleep without her, and it was becoming a real issue for her, and trying to understand where that was coming from. And this might not be exactly what you're looking for, Ashley, but I actually did a very similar game to this about what he could be afraid of and what is keeping him from being able to sleep by himself. And because it was a game, he was way more willing to talk about it with me. And I ended up finding out that there's gunshots and he heard them, and that's why he doesn't want to sleep by himself anymore. But his mom didn't know that's what the fear was. So by playing the game and I was silly. I was asking like things about like, are you afraid of, like chewing bubble gum or whatever? Like, you know what I mean? Like, like different kinds of things, like, like that. And to get to the bigger things was really a helpful thing. So if you're working with kids, that's a really good thing. There's a lot of generational trauma, right? Like that's a real thing. So fears that like grandparents had that then parents have can be trickled down to children. So how do you deal with that? It's really, you have to kind of deal with it within the family unit. You can do it one-on-one, but I almost think understanding like the family unit is as important. Ashley, did that answer your question a little bit?
It does. I love that example. And I think you're right. I think, maybe one could take the examples and these ideas and maybe kind of work it out on their own of what they think is going on. And then gratitudes in way of kind of being the light in that situation. Like if you can be grateful and share gratitudes with those generations, that might start to kind of untangle maybe some of the trauma.
Yeah.
That's kind of what came up for me. So that was really helpful to hear you speak that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful. I'm just longing for Sadhana to say something, because I know, Sadhana, you've worked in circles like this and diversity and inclusion, and I know you're very thoughtful, and I'm such a talkie box again. I would love to hear your thoughts, introspections.
Of course, yeah. Of course. I was thinking like the examples you gave where you're trying to figure out the fear, there's the other side of the coin is when sometimes it's because the others aren't aware, and people just don't know each other. Like really, you know, in Rukmini Prabhu, you talk about personal, radical personalism, and it's that distance that people keep. And often, even in families, you talk at superficial levels, so that awareness of somebody else's real fears or what's going on in their lives might not be present, and then it leads to these sort of events, right? So part of, I think one of the things I was kind of questioning in my brain is how do we create that awareness for others of each other? And, you know, going into a sort of exercises that you were sharing, Sarah, of the circles of people stepping in, coming out, that makes others aware, right? But it's such a purposefully way that's done. And we don't stop in families, we don't do that. And we don't stop in maybe, you know, even closed communities, like even in temple or something. So you don't always know. So it's easy to find ourselves stealing somebody else's joy because of that. So I was just trying to figure out how we might work on gaining more awareness, you know, outside of a corporate or a classroom structure, which is great because it does that. And I've seen that done marvelously in corporations as well. Huge Fortune 500 corporations love it, you know, and using the idea of circles and discussions, you know. But I'm just trying to figure out how we take it down to, like, you know, right now. And I think, Ashley, you were asking those questions. So yeah, that's where my head is. And just trying to figure out for myself how I might create that awareness in the family.
You know, it's so interesting to me that, you know, more cultures who are, you know, they would say primitive, but I would say cultures who are more close to their roots or close to the earth have these, it's really a ritual we're talking about. We're talking about a culture, our culture, that's robbed of rituals. And I'm being reminded, Sarah, while you were speaking, I was thinking of, you know, I have a good friend who lives here in Washington, Kunti Devi. She's married to two wonderful devotees, like leaders in our community, Kunti and Madhvacharya. And she's from Ethiopia. And she talks about how in her community in Ethiopia, when someone would have a trauma, or if there was addiction or a death in the family or some kind of trauma, some kind of issue, the community would actually circle them. This is so interesting. I don't know if you guys have heard of this before. The community would actually stand in a circle around that person and physically hold them, like actually physically hold them in the circle because of that trauma. Like, you know, it's so beautiful to me. It's like it's like a silent ritual that we are here for you. You know, we know that you're suffering in this way or that way, you know. And I think our culture is so robbed of that. So I think what you're doing, Sarah, in all this is creating intentional rituals that can enrich our hearts.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
I really love it. Yeah.
And I really love what you were saying about, like, how can we do this within the community? Also, and I was really thinking about it. It's like, you're not gonna tell someone like your deep dark secrets when you're getting prasad, like, you know. So like, where is it the appropriate place to do this, and how can we make people more aware? There is a Bhakti recovery group that's part of Wisdom of the Sages that I must think it's okay for me to say, I'm doing some work with them and talking about these kinds of things. And I think that having that kind of awareness, even in small pockets, I think is going to be really helpful within the community as well. And Rukmini Prabhu, like, I loved what you were just saying. And I hope that these are intentional rituals. That's like my plan and my hope is that people are way more community centered that I work with, and not so I driven, because that's where I feel like what we've been taught.
Yeah. And I love that, Sadhana, that you mentioned radical personalism, because that's so important. And I think our whole Bhakti philosophy is a radical philosophy of radical personalism, but we can be so much in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this is my philosophy. I'm a personalist, but when it comes to my personal dealings, it's all about me, or, you know, mine, or whatever. So I think this is super important. And to me, it's bringing the head to the heart and bringing the actions to the head, and, you know, like amalgamating the whole Atma, right? We understand the word Atma means the body, mind, and self. So this is about Atmaizing our true philosophy. And, you know,
I have a question that
yes,
I don't
please.
know if Sarah Prabhu or Rukmini Prabhu or who would be able to answer it. All this is making me think of a lot of times when I'm in a class where with other devotees and it feels like we're having, you know, Q&A, or it's like getting really like intimate. You feel like you know the people in the class, and then ultimately you may be empathizing with someone, you're sharing that. There'll be somebody that'll come in and kind of, I feel, shoots either me down or whoever's doing it by saying like, well, just remember, you know, we're not our bodies, or don't get so attached to your feelings. It's not about what makes you happy, it's what makes Krishna happy. And again, a lot of these things are truths that are part of our teachings, but a lot of times it feels like they're being said in a way to weaponize and to kind of take away from a moment where somebody's empathizing with someone else, they're connecting, they're kind of having what you're talking about, like it kind of steals the joy away from what's happening. And I don't know how to handle it, and I would love some feedback or suggestion.
So it's funny that you said that. I refer to that as yuck my yum. Like when my students will say something and they start like getting like, they'll get negative or they'll try to just like intellectualize something, and like I like make kind of a joke about it because that's how I deal with things, and maybe it's not the best way. I'm like, don't yuck my yum. I'm like, I'm really into like, you know, I'm having this emotional connection and you're making it all about like this intellectual thing. That's not what it's about for me right now. It's about this. And I can respect that you have this opinion, but you're yucking my yum. So you got to stop that. And I know that we're
as a PS, also, especially when it's a senior Vaishnava that's doing it. That's why, yeah.
Yeah, that's way harder. I don't know that I would say that to anyone. Like I might say it to you, but I don't know if I would say it to like someone else. Like I'm like, don't yuck my yum. But it's, I always find that like to make it, I don't know. I like to make it like I'm not angry or upset, because I do feel like that then puts someone on the defensive. That like letting them know they crossed my boundary without it being about being defensive. So that works for me, but I don't know if that, I don't know how someone else would would do that.
I wonder too, Andrea, as I'm thinking about that example, you know, Rukmini and I were speaking about the role of the feminine in bhakti, and, you know, to actually just sort of shine empathy or shine the emotions back. And in that moment, you know, it could be a teaching moment for that, you know, more advanced devotee to just, I mean, and again, not to shoot them down, but I wonder, and maybe Rukmini, you could speak to this, if part of the feminine could be, I could just say, you know, but that's not my experience. And I think it's okay that I had an emotional experience and I had a response in my body. And, you know, can both of them be okay? Can we have both of those? Because I feel like, you know, if nothing is spoken and that is said, that that word weaponizing just really struck me, because, you know, that can be really damaging to the relationship and to the energy of the room. So I don't know. I mean, Rukmini, do you or Sadhana, any, like, how would you shift that? How could you shift that comment and reflect back a more feminine energy?
I wanted to say that, yeah, she just was way more mature than I was. And just want to say that out loud, but yes, go ahead.
Yes, Sadhana, what would you say?
Well, I can share a personal story. My mother, from ever when I was young, when something would go wrong, she used to say things like, well, we came to the world with nothing, we're leaving with nothing, so don't worry about it. You know, my brother scratches my record. That tells you how old I am, records. But and I used to sit there and I used to like swell up inside because I just didn't know what she meant, you know. And it was like, it's this very abstract thought, right? We're not, what she's saying is this is transition and you kind of don't want to get stuck in it. And it took me years before I took it from what was in my mind into my heart, because she didn't ever understand why I was upset about it, because it's in her heart. She grew up that way. That's her heart talking, not her head. She doesn't talk about these things intellectually. She didn't study the Vedas or, you know, do that. So it's just taken me years to find that I opened my heart to it, and I needed that maturity. So that's my personal story. And I can only relate to that and be very grateful to her for always for doing that. So, and there was a couple of other sayings she said. I'm trying to recall them. That the story, they just come up, and they were always too abstract. But I think that's something that maybe it's a personal journey. I don't know, Rukmini Prabhu. That's where I come from.
Yeah, you know, I guess there could be so many different scenarios we could think of, but you know, I think maybe bringing up some empathy to you know, I guess the scenario is a little abstract for me, but like bringing up some kind of that must have been very painful for you. You know, in other words, like you know, it would be a little bit I think cold and heartless to say, well, I didn't feel it like that, you know, but to say that must have been really painful for you. Not, you know, not like, you know, sometimes people say, well, I'm sorry that you felt like that, but no, but you know, that must have been painful for you. But it's it's really a kind of a big conversation, because this conversation about privilege and about a hierarchy and you know, like another thing that was brought up for me while you were speaking, I don't know if I just answered something or not, but I guess we could have a real life scenario. Suddenly you just reminded me of, I have a friend who's Punjabi, and her grandmother used to say when she would get angry, she would say, well, you should just jump in a well and die, which is, it sounds so shocking to us as Americans, but this was like a very common saying that a Punjabi, it's like a slang expression in Punjabi that someone might say to their child. That's so shocking to us. But the idea of privilege and you know, and yeah, so I was, what came up for me, because I've been thinking about this the last few days. I was reading something from Amanda Gorman, who is this youth poet laureate of the US now. She spoke at the Biden inauguration. And I have a little, you know, piece from her that I cut out, that I stuck on my fridge, about, you know, just being the light and having the courage to be the light and that kind of thing. But anyway, she made a comment that was troubling to me, because, I mean, obviously she's a person of color, and she's, you know, her whole, you know, whole life is having to work through adversity. She like, she's a person of language, but she had like a speech impediment or a hearing loss or something like that. So anyway, she went to, I think she went to Harvard, and she said something about other students having the luxury, other students who are not people of color, having the luxury to be able to write a poem about getting lost in the woods. And I was thinking, how, isn't that interesting? It's almost like a reverse, you know, a reverse joy stealing kind of thing, where, you know, yes, I honor you and the obstacles you and your community have had to face for you to be where you are today, but to diminish someone else who maybe comes from a place of white privilege, you know, that person's poem about getting lost in the woods, you know, as a white whatever, is just as valid for that person as your poetry or your writing is for you. So just that kind of you know, stealing joy is really what it's about. And I've been thinking about that the last few days, how, you know, we have to be so sensitive to to other people's, it's such a beautiful topic for me, other people's fears, other people's burdens, that, you know, I might think, oh, that's nothing, you know, you have nothing to deal with. You're like a, you know, white guy from the suburbs. You went to Harvard on a scholarship. You're so entitled. But, you know, are a million other things, you know, or like the senior devotee who's doing some spiritual bypass, we call it, right, in the Bhagavatam class, who's like, oh, well, you're just, it's just your mind. And you should realize that you're not your mind or emotions, and you're not this body. So just get with the program. You know, but it's a very interesting. What else do you guys, what does this bring up for all of you? Because I could just talk and talk.
No, well, I Christian, Drew, I'm going to get you in 1 second. I actually just want to say that's actually how the whole, when I do the retreat, the communication retreat, that is the whole, how it's, the whole thing is culminated, is this idea of each person, you don't know their story until you get to know them. And anytime you put upon, you think they have privilege, or they have this, you're putting upon and stealing their joy, and also just stealing their identity. You're not letting them be who they are and being okay with being who they are. And I think that for me, like, you just like kind of wrapped it up with a nice bow of what the end is for me when I do this. Sorry, I wanted to just say that out loud. Krishna, Drew.
I like stories, so I'll share one quick story. So there was one Prabhu, and I think this is a real story. So one brahmachari was really sick, and he was like taking care of himself by drinking hot water and whatever, like, you know, just taking care of himself. And then other brahmachari comes up in the ashram and tells him, Prabhu, we are not our body, meaning like stop being like taking care of yourself so much. So the Prabhu who was sick says like, Prabhu, you are not my body. So I just thought,
Awesome.
so, you know, Prabhu, you don't know what I'm going through, right? So, you know, you're not my body. So I just thought I would share, like, you know, on a lighter side, you know. But yeah, I mean, I thought like that story shares the, you don't know what someone else is going through. And, you know, I always believe be kinder than necessary, because you don't know what others are fighting, right? So.
Sadhna.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. I think I recall one of the big other factors in all of this is, especially in that gratitude ladder I was talking about last week, that there's this idea that we don't assume bad intent from the other person. It's a really subtle but very important aspect of many discussions and dialogues. And so starting with the good intention in mind is a better way to start than with the bad intention. And then maybe probe, well, why do you say that? Inquiry, you know, because we might be escalating down because of what prompted us. So we've got to be more inquiry to get us back up, if that makes sense, right? Because unfortunately, life is never going to be, it's just going to be hard. You know, there's never a way. So it's knowing how to do the journey versus where you are, and like where you get stuck. Just find a way to keep going up. So.
And just to cover it up, Sadhna Prabhu's like, you know, and tell me more is what I love. Absolutely. You know, why do you think so? Tell me more. And I feel like that's just most wonderful tool. Sorry.
It's great. It's a great tool. Like always in any kind of setting to be, tell me more. Like, I want to understand that. That is, I think, a really perfect thing to do with anybody. Rukmini Prabhu.
Yeah, I love that also. And I was also thinking that, you know, we see other people's actions, but we don't see their intention. And people see my actions, but they don't see my intentions. And I think of myself as a work in progress, but I see other people as that's what they are, set in stone, right? this is my child. He's doing it wrong. I wish he wasn't this, that, and the other thing, or my husband, or this or that. So I see my own intentions, but I don't see others' intentions behind their actions. And I think that's a big stumbling block when we, like maybe that's part of tell me more, that, I see that you just smashed me in the face, or, you stole my cookie, but what was behind that? What was your intention in smashing me or stealing my cookie? What exactly were you thinking, or what prompted you to say that? Or tell me more about what you were thinking or doing.
And I feel like if we were to ask those questions, because I feel like, I have 2 small kids, so sometimes they just don't know why they smashed their sister's face or, ripped the toy away. But, as adults, if we start this conversation, I love that you're doing this in high schools, but just, asking, tell me more, explain more. And not only does it help you understand where the other person is coming from, but then it gives them an opportunity to say, I don't know why I did that. Let me inquire more deeply too. And I think that how lovely would that be to have more of that type of interaction?
And to go on with that, oftentimes I'll when I'm having conversations that are more difficult, I'll say, what I heard you say was, to make sure that I'm getting the actual understanding of what they were trying to explain to me, so that they can hear it and say, yeah, that's what I meant, or no, that's not exactly what I meant. They'll add something, or they'll say something else. And I said, oh, that makes more sense because now I understand this and this. And again, I do a lot of repeating when I'm having conversations, either with therapy clients or students, to make sure that I'm gaining understanding, especially when it comes to something where I can't understand, because I can't understand anyone else's story because it's their story, but especially if it's like someone of a different race or religion, and I want to understand, that I'm very clear to make sure that I'm repeating so that they know that I'm hearing them. So that's something else that I do to add to that.
Beautiful. Anyone? I have something else, but anyone else? Does this bring up anything for any of you? I was just reminded of, I heard this story. I didn't get to hear this man speak, our wonderful temple president here. We have a woman temple president in Washington and Ananda Vrindavan. She went to hear this man speak, and I didn't get to go with her, but he was a Black man who started a dialogue with the Ku Klux Klan. Have any of you heard of this? It's so amazing. So he started a dialogue, and his thesis was, well, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? But he was seeking to be understood, but he started by trying to understand them. And he was really studying their symbols and studying their rituals and studying all the things they did. And so then he was dialoguing with them about all the things that they believed and they did. And then gradually, little by little, they started, he changed their hearts, and they started sending him, like, my anti-Martin Luther King t-shirt, or my white Ku Klux Klan robe. That he would get these things in the mail, and I'm out, our dialogue, our conversation, now I'm out. And he was actually changing people's hearts, one heart at a time, in such an authentic way. That amazing story. Do you happen to know his name, Sarah?
I don't, but I know about him. Yet I know that he constantly, I think he actually has I don't want to say like a museum, but he has something where he displays these things that people have given to him because they've, I've heard him speak. He's extraordinary, like on YouTube. I'll look it up.
Yeah, I would love to.
Everybody.
Yeah, so heart changing empathy, and it's these barricaded hearts. It's interesting, Andrea, that you brought up senior devotees and all this kind of thing. So these kind of barricaded hearts can be in a Ku Klux Klan member. It could be in a senior ISKCON devotee. It could be in a 3-year-old. It could be with your husband, or it could be with your best friend about some misunderstanding, some assumption, right? You know, I made an assumption about something she did, but actually it had nothing to do with why she really did it. So that tell me more is so important. And just like on that ladder that Sadhna sent to all of us, to that change point of be curious. You know, it seemed like that was the real place of change, right in the middle, when I can sort of step out of my own ego and my own anxiety and my own irritated, you know, whatever, to just be curious and say, wow, what is it that just happened here? Can you tell me more? Or can you open your heart to share with me? Why did you smack your sister? Or why did you steal someone's lunch? Or whatever it might be. This is so wonderful. What else, quiet ladies?
I wanted to say thank you, everyone, for allowing me to share some of these things that I teach and have learned. And I'm just so grateful to be able to talk about it and think about it in a Krishna conscious way, because I've never had the opportunity to do that. So I'm just so appreciative of this space and this time to be able to do that. And that's what I wanted to say. So thank you so much.
I think we need you to share more. I mean, I would almost like you to, I mean, I know we have to end right now because Ashley's babysitter is going to run out the door if we don't end. But I would almost like wondering, Sarah, if you could focus in, like zero in on maybe one of these aspects. But anyway, let's see. Let's discuss what we want to do at our next session. Do we have a next section? Wait, we gotta end.
I would recommend maybe if we stop the recording here, just because